afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Fry, and I serve as president of Student Alumni Board.
And I'm Krista McKittrick, and I'm the vice president of campus programming for SAB.
And on behalf of Student Alumni Board, we'd like to welcome you all here to our 4th annual Distinguished Young Alumni. We are very excited to have the keynotes presentations going on, and just before we begin the presentation today, there's a few people that we would like to thank. So first and foremost, we want to thank the Alumni Association and the Board of Directors for making this possible, for their continued support of DYA and all of Student Alumni Board's programming. We specifically want to recognize the Alumni Association's President and CEO, Amy Button-Rins. We'd also like to thank President Kirk Scholes and Vice President of Student Life, Dr. Bosco, for their ongoing support and promotion of the Distinguished Young Alumni Program. Finally, we would like to extend a warm welcome to the families of our recipients who are with us this afternoon.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with Student Alumni Board, SAB is a group of about 35 students who serve the university by providing a physical link to the past, present, and future Wildcats. Over the past 8 months, the members of SAB have worked behind the scenes on the Distinguished Young Alumni Program in an effort to connect current K-State students with some of the most passionate and accomplished K-State graduates under the age of 35. This year, we are excited to introduce to you our Distinguished Young Alumni Award recipients, the 2016 honorees, Dr. Kourtney Bettinger and Mr. Clemente Jaquez.
For the first keynote presentation, we are honored to welcome Kourtney Bettinger. Following Kourtney's keynote, we will open the floor for question and answer, and then at the conclusion of the question and answer, there will be a reception with refreshments in the lobby outside of the Little Theater. Please feel free to mingle and enjoy the cookies and the drinks. And then at 4, we will welcome Clemente for the second half of the keynote presentations. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Yes. So our first honoree, a native of Kansas City, is a physician and pediatric resident at the University of Colorado School of Medicine in Denver, Colorado. While at K-State, she served as president of Student Alumni Board, president of the Rotaract Club, and as a member of Kappa Kappa Gamma Sorority and Mortarboard Senior Honor Society. She was also a 2006 Truman Scholar. After graduating from K-State in 2006 with a degree in modern language, she earned a master's degree in public health from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and graduated from the University of Kansas School of Medicine. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kourtney.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. All right. So I especially want to thank Krista and Taylor for that wonderful introduction and for being kind of the faces of all of the SABers and Alumni Association who coordinated this wonderful event. I've had a great time the last couple of days reconnecting with people who were influential while I was here, as well as meeting students who are here interested in things I'm similarly interested in, and I'm just so impressed by all of them. They're very rejuvenating. Let's see. So being back on campus and looking back 10 years ago from when I graduated, it makes me really proud to be a K-Stater. I, as Krista said, was also a member of Student Alumni Board, which was a fantastic organization. It still is. I really look back on my time with Student Alumni Board fondly. It taught me about professionalism and the importance of alumni relations. I had the utmost respect for my fellow SABers, and one of them got married last summer. I was lucky enough to perform the ceremony. So really friendships that last at least 10 years so far. So I graduated from K-State in 2006. I'm coming up, like I said, on 10 years as an alumna. I've spent nearly 8 of those years in medical training, and I'm now just 4 months away from graduating residency and becoming a public health and global health-minded pediatrician. I'm excited to share with you how my experiences at K-State have helped pave the way to where I am today. I would like to start by telling you about a girl that I'll call Luisa. She's a young woman who grew up in poverty. She lives in a town of about 15,000 people called Izamal. So Izamal is located on the Yucatan Peninsula inside that red box. It's about 3 hours inland from Cancun, halfway between Mérida and then the famous archaeologic ruins of Chichen Itza, which are not on this map. But so Izamal is close to Cancun, but it has almost nothing in common with Cancun. It's heavily influenced by indigenous culture. Most older women wear traditional dress. Izamal is a pretty conservative community, and many people speak Mayan alone or Mayan with Spanish as a second language. Horse-drawn carriages, as you can see here, line the two main plazas where every building is painted a color of deep yellow. Catholicism also has a strong influence on Izamal's community and culture. The town revolves around a massive convent that the Spaniards built after they bult with the rocks that they used when they unfortunately tore down the Mayan pyramids on their arrival. In the early 1990s, the Pope visited the convent and gave a mass, which helped really boost Izamal's tourism industry. Like much of Mexico, Izamal has values that include family, so families of the utmost importance, and it's very popular to sit around and spend time with people. Let's see. So going back to Luisa, she is an only child. Her father is an abusive alcoholic who sporadically sells coconuts for a living. Her mother loves her dearly, but has physical and intellectual impairments that limit her ability to provide for Luisa. As a child, she depended on her community, Luisa did, to meet her basic needs. Various neighbors fed her, and she received support from a Mérida-based nonprofit called Fundación Cultural Yucatán, or Yucatan Cultural Foundation. The foundation is located in a building, or was located in a building right across the street from that famous convent on the prior slide. And it sponsored Luisa and maybe a dozen other children in Izamal by providing free after-school programs, an educational summer camp, and some food to supplement their households. The foundation also served the community in general because the educational programs were open to the public as well for a nominal cost. So I met Luisa when I volunteered for the foundation's Curso de Verano, or summer camp. Every year, the K-State, at that time called the Community Service Program, now a part of Leadership Studies, sent 4 students to live in Izamal and teach at this Curso de Verano as a service learning project. I will forever be grateful to Carol Gould, who chose me as one of the 2003 Izamal team members. I was 19 years old. I had just finished my freshman year here at K-State. I was planning to be an actuary or marine biologist at the time, and I had no idea how my life was about to change. I remember the day that Luisa and I met. I was experiencing culture shock. This was my first major trip, I would say, outside of the United States, and I was trying to help children with their math homework at the after-school program. These are some of the beautiful children there. My Spanish skills were a lot less useful than I had anticipated, and I barely understood the first graders who were speaking to me. I am very embarrassed to admit, in this whole undergoing culture shock thing, I was perplexed by seatless toilets, and I worried that every time I drank the water or ate food, I was going to get diarrhea. I was very naive. Needless to say, I was not at my best that afternoon that I met Luisa, but I was very lucky to meet her. At first, my team members and I thought that she was loud, harsh, and on the bossy side. We spent our initial evenings, I remember wondering kind of about her life. We wondered what was her home like? Why did she act like this? Was she sort of harsh on the outside, protecting herself from something? And over time, we got to know her, and we learned more about her, kind of the things that I shared earlier, and we came to see her as a strong, intelligent girl who was fiercely protective of her mother and deeply committed to the Catholic Church's moral guidance. Luisa was unlucky, though, in that she was born into poverty. I had never witnessed true poverty before I went to Izamal and met Luisa. I was a 19-year-old who had been raised in Midwestern small towns and suburbs, and I didn't yet understand the social determinants of health. I wasn't sure why so many children, and adults for that matter, were shorter than children that I saw in the United States. I didn't, at that time, understand the links between chronic malnutrition and stunting. I didn't know why so many children had bad teeth, and it merely seemed strange to me that roosters and pigs ran through some of the dirt floor homes. I wasn't able to connect all of the things back then. I didn't understand why the tap water was contaminated, but I knew that I wasn't supposed to drink it myself. But what I did understand and appreciate as the summer went on about poverty was that Louisa didn't arrive to camp with her mid-morning breakfast like most of the kids. For that matter, the other children that the foundation sponsored usually didn't arrive either with food. I recognized that children who were the smallest in size, not the smallest in age, seemed less alert than the others. I learned that a $2 to $3 camp enrollment fee, which seemed like a minimal cost to me, even as a college student, was a significant barrier for some of the families. I realized that education beyond elementary school was often seen as a privilege. I met teenagers who were still in school because the foundation had supported them and provided extra help to supplement their family's meager means. I also worked with a young woman who, despite being raised by a single mother in Isamel, was employed as a local teacher because she had made it through college. Over the course of the summer, kind of taking all of this into consideration, I came to realize that Louisa faced some tough odds. We spent a lot of time together, mostly playing games, drawing, practicing Spanish, and enjoying the summer camp. I learned a lot about Isamel. The children taught me a lot, and they never tired of making fun of my Spanish. Sometimes they even ventured out to try to teach words in Mayan. They seemed oblivious to that. I thought I should probably work on Spanish before I went for a third language. On the weekends, Louisa and the other kids, they would come into our house. We lived a couple blocks from the foundation, and they would jump in our hammocks and drag us back to the foundation so that we could play games and work on art projects and kind of spend the days together. So looking back on it, I learned a lot from Louisa. She taught me how to slow down and appreciate relationships. I had one particular moment about halfway through the summer that was really the true turning point for me. It was a moment of reflection. I was watching Shrek in Spanish, surrounded by 60 of the camp kids, and all of a sudden, I felt a deep sense of calm and contentment that I had never before experienced. It was as if I could detach myself somehow from the experience just enough to see myself thriving in a novel way. I wasn't solving math problems or learning scientific theories while I was in Isamel. There, I was working with children, and I loved it. It was the moment that I felt like I caught a glimpse of my true self. All of a sudden, my time in Isamel transitioned from being an interesting experience that I was excited to try out to being the foundation for a new way of life. It has been a life that prioritizes relationships, equality, and children's well-being. With this new perspective, all of a sudden time started flying by, and before I knew it, the summer ended. I bid Louisa, the other kids, my Yucatecan friends, and Isamel itself goodbye. Louisa gave me this drawing that obviously I still have, and she also wrote me a very nice letter that still brings tears to my eyes. I felt like I was leaving behind a magical place whose people and culture had taught me 1,000 times more than I had ever dreamed that I could have taught them as a camp leader. But I suppose that is why we call it service learning. I came home from Isamel a different person. I think it's cliched often to call things a life-changing experience, but my time with Louisa and my summer in Isamel certainly was. I'd been exposed to children who were afflicted by poverty, and I began to identify children as a uniquely vulnerable population. Suddenly, I no longer found the same meaning in becoming an actuary or a marine biologist. I just couldn't imagine doing anything where I wasn't working with children and working for children. I thought about Louisa every day as I reflected on my newly discovered calling, which was starting to take place over time, starting to take shape as a future in public service. Over the next 2 years, I sought many opportunities to build upon what I had learned about myself in Isamel. I returned to Mexico, this time to a northern city for a second service learning project. I taught English to adolescent girls who had been removed from abusive home environments and placed in a government-run home. I learned a great deal from them, particularly about the vulnerability of young women, but my thoughts always returned to Louisa. I changed my math and biology majors to Spanish, International Studies, and Latin American Studies. I became pre-med, not necessarily because I thought I was going to be a doctor at the time, but I had worked really hard to take a lot of math and science classes, and I at least wanted them to count for something. Imagine part of being pre-med is doing organic chemistry, and I remember the day that my lab partner found out. I came every Monday afternoon for 5 hours to organic chemistry lab as a Spanish major. They were shocked. They did not understand why I was there. I didn't really necessarily understand it either, but I kept doing it. I also became a student coordinator for K-State's international service teams, striving to help other students have similar experiences by facilitating their global service learning projects. I also, through those experiences, came to see health and education as two vital elements for optimizing children's development. Most importantly, those were all important things, but really the key, I think, is that I returned to Izamal every summer. I strengthened relationships with Luisa and others that I came to see as my Yucatecan family. These are two of them that I love dearly. I would lie in my hammock or sit in the plaza reflecting on where my life was going and if I was staying true to the goals that I had set for myself that first summer. A week after one such trip, I found myself sitting on a bus from the Tikal ruins in northern Guatemala to Flores, the town where I was staying. Coincidentally, I was with the fellow SABers traveling around Central America, and I'm not sure why it happened there, but I had this other aha moment, similar to the one that I had in Izamal, but I guess a more evolved version of that. I'm not sure why it took me so long to figure out that I wanted to be a physician, but at that point I realized that a career in medicine and global health was the perfect combination of using my science brain, my calling to direct service, and my goal of making Luisa's world a better place. Luckily, it all came together just in the nick of time. With the help of Jim Hohenberry, Mary Toller, Trent Armbrust, and many others, I applied for and I received the Harry S. Truman Scholarship. As a Truman Scholar, I qualified for a program that paid for my in-state medical school tuition, which was really just the final push I needed to pursue medical training. I took my last undergraduate visit to Izamal in December of 2006. It seemed fitting that I spent my graduation day in the place where I discovered my true self. It was my fourth return trip to Izamal and the first time that I didn't see Luisa. The foundation had pulled out of Izamal, unfortunately, and I worried that visiting Luisa was more self-serving than for her benefit. I was there with Chelsea, one of my original team members and one of my best friends. There she is with more of our close friends and family down there. We both felt like a chapter was closing, especially now that the foundation had left Izamal. It was with heavy hearts that we left Izamal after that trip, but we both felt that it was time for the next step in life, or in our lives. So I'm just going to quickly go back to my junior year at K-State. I joined Mortarboard, and I met Brandon, the man who would 5 years later become my husband. I don't think either of us suspected our future together back then as juniors in college, but we became friends over time as we continued on Mortarboard and as he actually did an international service team to rural Brazil. In fact, I remember having to ask Mary's permission to go on a date with him, because I was technically his teacher through the class that prepared students to go on these international service trips. After that date, Brandon and I went our separate ways, but we ended up not only in the same medical school class, but also in the same study group. We started dating after we went on a medical outreach trip together to Belize, and as things became more serious, I felt like he just couldn't fully know me without visiting Izamal and revisiting the place and being there with me. So it took about a year, but we finally made it there over spring break, and we got engaged, which was very memorable. It was my secret dream to always become engaged in Izamal. I don't know why. Why do you know why? But anyway, he knew me well enough to do that. And it was really wonderful. I got to see my Yucatecan family again and spend time with them. But unfortunately, I learned that Luisa had dropped out of school after getting pregnant. She took care of her children, and so didn't have formal employment, and her partner had no formal employment either. I was heartbroken that Luisa hadn't escaped the generational cycle of poverty. So I have spent the last 8 years gaining the skills and knowledge necessary for a career in pediatrics and public health. I have learned a lot about domestic poverty and how it affects children, first as a Truman Scholar interning at an educational nonprofit in Washington, D.C., then as the director of a free clinic during medical school, and now as a pediatric resident working in a county hospital system. Truly, I spend every day with vulnerable children. Most of them are disadvantaged by chronic illness, poverty, or both. I have spent the last 3 years going to the hospital every day to work with people who remind me of Louisa. I, along the way, have also learned more about global poverty and come to understand better how it affects children. My global health training has included getting a master's of public health in global health. I have done research in maternal health in the Dominican Republic. I've worked at a Brazilian public hospital, and I most recently have been staffing a clinic in rural Guatemala as a resident. I've witnessed the devastating effects of the lack of access to care, malnutrition, and unclean water, among many other things, on children's development, especially in Guatemala the last year or so. Although it wasn't Izamol that I first started to understand myself, the learning process is ongoing. In the last 3 years, I have found that I am especially interested in neonatal survival, both in the United States and globally. I had the opportunity to study Guatemala's neonatal care system, and I'm developing a project to research how caregivers recognize the danger signs of when a newborn becomes ill. In 4 short months, I'll graduate residency, moving to Kansas City, and I'll be starting a new chapter as a bilingual pediatrician serving Wyandotte County. Wyandotte County is one of the most medically underserved counties in the state and has the highest newborn mortality rate. While there, I hope to strengthen my clinical skills while I continue advocating for children and working to optimize their future. So thank you again for coming, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Transition like after the first time when you first got back to K-State?
That's a great question. So the question is, he studied abroad before, and how did I transition back to K-State the first time? It was really hard. I didn't talk about that, but I definitely went through reverse culture shock. I remember coming home and walking into my parents' home and touching my feet on carpet, and looking around and just thinking how wonderful of a life I had, and I had no idea that I had such a wonderful life. I had a really hard time finding the same meaning in some of the things that I did as a freshman. I remember going tailgating and just looking around and thinking, this doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. I just wish I were back spending time with kids. And so it was very hard. I had a lot of crying, and I had a lot of reflection. It was a ripe environment to think more about it, and I think sort of an encouragement to keep finding experiences like that and not stop after one summer. Yes?
Looking back at your time at K-State from your perspective now, is there anything you would want to have done or like have told yourself?
Yeah, so the question is, looking back at my K-State experience now, is there anything that I wish I would have done or told myself? Luckily, I got this question earlier, and I did not have a good answer. It took me a long time to think about. The only thing that I do wish I could have spent more time studying abroad. I went every summer, and I spent a semester, but it would have been really nice to spend a full year. However, I wouldn't have changed it because that would have taken away from my amazing experiences here. I think that I would tell myself that it's okay to question things, it's okay to not feel content with what's around you, and it's okay to not know what you want to do about it. Just keep trying things, and eventually something will click, and you can take a little piece from every experience that you like and put together the puzzle of what you want your life to be. Yes?
So what do you think your most rewarding experience has been like within the States, like since you started being in medicine?
Yeah, so the question is, what's been my most rewarding experience in the States, especially since starting medicine? So without a doubt, working with a free clinic when I was a medical student is the best thing I've probably ever done. There's a student-run clinic in Wyandotte County that serves a large Spanish-speaking population and really fits a nice niche in Wyandotte County that provides care to people who otherwise really have no other option but to go to the emergency department and pay out of pocket. I was lucky. I started out as an interpreter, which is when I learned medical Spanish, and then started volunteering as a student, became sort of an assistant director my first year, and then came on to be one of the executive directors as a second-year student. And I think once a week going to clinic and seeing patients get health care that they much needed and wouldn't necessarily have was the encouragement I needed to continue studying the basic sciences and kind of get through that part where you feel so disconnected from human beings and medical training. Yes?
You mentioned you're going to continue your passion for serving in Wyandotte County, but in your future, do you see yourself returning to Central America?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the questions if I plan to return to Central America or see myself, definitely. I definitely do. I'm actually going back to Guatemala in May, perhaps again in August, depending on how things play out. But I need to get my loans paid off and gain some better clinical skills, I think. Just get used to being an autonomous healthcare provider rather than functioning within a network of lots of residents and attendings where someone else can always make the decision for me if I need them to. So I'm looking forward to having at least a couple of years where I get to work with people in Wyandotte County and then hopefully be spending much more time abroad after that. Yes?
What was the process of learning a second language like for you, and what has that meant for you in pursuing your career in global health?
Great. So the question is, what was it like learning a second language, and how did that affect the process of global health? So I started learning Spanish when I was in 6th grade, and I think I did the hard part, the memorizing of all the tenses and the conjugations and things when I was in middle school, and so I kind of forgot about that part until I tried to learn Portuguese in the last couple of years. And then I remembered how many hours I had put in memorizing flashcards and things like that. But as I said in my talk, I got to Mexico and I really didn't speak Spanish that well, despite having studied it for, I think, 7 years by then. And so what really helped me pull it together was spending time in Spanish-speaking environments, mostly in Latin America, but also after starting medical school, continuing to work in environments where people speak Spanish so that I didn't lose all of my Spanish skills as medicine infiltrated my brain. And it's been incredibly helpful in pursuing my career. I've had a lot of doors open because I can either communicate with our Spanish-speaking only patients here in Denver. There's a huge Spanish-speaking population there, and so it's come in very handy. And then I've had opportunities to go different places because I'd be able to get there and speak Spanish. I don't think I probably would have been able to go to Izamal if I hadn't spoken Spanish, and then I don't think I'd be where I am today. Yes?
As our world increasingly gets more diverse, what would you tell some of the students who are here on campus if they want to learn more about different cultures? What would you recommend for them to do?
Great. Oh, that's my answer. Okay. Shoot. So the question is what I would do to recommend, or what I would recommend to students who want to learn more about other cultures without studying abroad. So my story happened in Izamal, or started in Izamal, but it could have started in Wyandotte County. It could have started in Washington, D.C., could have started in Wichita, and it could have started in Denver, really. All the places that I've been, I guess you don't always get to choose who you're working with, but you do have some say in what you're working for, and so putting oneself in uncomfortable situations, not being afraid of being around people who are different than you, and then being open to all that they have to offer and all that you can learn from the culture. I took a lot away from my time in Mexico. It wasn't just my change in my profession. I also really feel like I learned about the importance of relationships and spending time with people and slowing down so that I made a conscious effort to be with people. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Kourtney. I think I speak for everyone in saying we just really enjoyed your presentation and learned a lot. So at this point, we're going to have a reception in the back of the little theater, cookies and punch. So please feel free to go back, mingle, have something to eat, and then Clemente will be presenting at 4 o'clock. All right, thank you.